Takeoff runway 3 left, Thunderbirds push 6.
Yeehaw! We'll be taking off for the Las Vegas flyover. Las Vegas flyover, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Departure of Thunderbirds airborne, passing 3,500 for 5,000.
Go, baby! Right there! Come on, they're ready now.
What's unique about Texas is that really that's where all of our pilot training bases are at. Is it when you go to undergraduate pilot training, they're in Del Rio, they're at Sheppard, pilot instructor training there. There's actually one in Oklahoma, advanced, and there's one in Mississippi as well. But we have so many military bases in Texas. It's a very military-friendly state, and we love going to Texas because it's awesome. We always get a lot of people to got a lot of land, and so when you're talking about executing these high performance, high speed, low altitude maneuvers, towers are not your friend. Towers and buildings are not your friend. So Texas is pretty flat in most places that we go to. Anyways, my call sign in Massaua was actually Lone Star. It was a little nod at Texas because, that's where I met my wife. That's where I did pilot training and everything like that.
The motto of the wing at Sheppard Air Force Base that does the flying is the fighter pilot starts here. So Sheppard Air Force Base is home of what we call ENNJPT, but it's ENNJPT. And what that stands for is Euro NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training. And it's actually the only pilot training in the world like it. So it's actually not a US-run pilot training organization. It's actually a NATO-run pilot training organization. So you have Germans and Dutch and Belgium and Italians and Spanish and Turkish and Americans all training in the same spot. And we all pull our funds together and we have our own committees that form to make changes to the syllabus and things like that. And so it's a pretty unique pilot training program that's in this small little town called Wichita Falls, Texas. So I'm pretty proud of it, with Wichita Falls being my hometown. That said, one thing that's unique about ENNJPT is that when you start there, you start flying your primary aircraft, which is the T6 Texan. It's a fun little, 1,100 horsepower turboprop airplane. It's a really fun airplane, and that's kind of the first one you jump in on. You train in that for about 6 months, and then normally in other pilot training bases, what happens is you split. You either go to helicopters, or you go to heavies, the T1s, or you go to fighters, T-38s, and you kind of get a track for where you want to go. One thing that's unique about ENNJPT at Sheppard Air Force Base in Wichita Falls is that everyone goes from T6s to T-38s. So you are by no means guaranteed a fighter, but you are guaranteed to go down that fighter track as long as you don't wash out. So generally what they do is after you're done with the T-38 training, as you get towards the end, you get rack and stacked amongst your peers. They take the top graduate. They say, okay, give us your dream list. They take his dream list. They take the Air Force's list of what's available, and they match as high as possible. They go to the second guy on the list, and they match as high as possible. Well, there's only so many fighters that are dropped. So even in that organization, you still do have to perform well enough and honestly get lucky with how many fighters have been assigned. And then you have to perform well in order to be able to be assigned a fighter. So I'm a little biased. I think Texas is the best state in the nation, right? But Texas is a pretty incredible state. I love the people that come from there, and I think that they have grit. I think that they're tough people, and I think that they have a sense of service. We have in the Air Force over 11% of the people in the country are from Texas. And I think Texas is only 5% of the population. So when you look at it, there is statistically a lot more people that are in. And you probably, please fact check me on that because that data is a little bit old. But I think it's 11% and then only 5% of the population. And I think that goes to show that Texans are committed to serve. They see something that is more, that is larger than themselves, and they want to go serve and be a part of that. So that's one reason why I'm really proud to represent Texas on the Thunderbirds. We have 660,000 people that are in the United States Air Force. And I'm helping to represent, I'm a small portion representing the entire Air Force and kind of the capabilities of the Air Force.
So Nellis Air Force Base is an interesting base. We don't have much in the way of combat units here like other bases. This is mostly a training base, but it's like a very, very advanced training base. We train all kinds of, we have what's called a weapons school here, which is a 6-month program. It's kind of like, it's like Top Gun, but better and more involved. And so we have weapons school here, which every airframe in the Air Force has a weapons school. And so the guys come here for 6 months and they train to become weapons officers. We train a lot of different PJs here, the pararescue men, all kinds of different combat training. We do what's called red flags and green flags, which are big simulated wars, where we invite people from all over the country and all over the world units to come and train with them. So this is a little bit different of a base. We don't have a lot in the way of like combat units where these guys pick up and go deploy and fight. This is like a very, very highly advanced training base.
We were born out of the jet age to represent airmen and to inspire the next generation. This team has become, more than 65 years later, is much more than airshow performers. We are leaders demonstrating the capabilities of America's Air Force to our great nation, as well as spreading goodwill to nations abroad. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. This is your United States Air Force Air Demonstration Squadron. We are the Thunderbirds. The Korean War was still going on, and the F-84G was a frontline fighter, and some called it the workhorse of the war. The first Thunderbirds team would fly 5 of these aircraft. Major Dick Catledge was picked as the Thunderbirds' first commander. Crazy as it may sound today, he had only 3 weeks until their first air show, so the Thunderbirds were quickly formed. Jets were painted, and by June of 1953, they were performing. As the years passed, the aircraft changed. Thunderjet, Thunderstreak, Super Sabre, Thunder Chief, Phantom, Talon. All these aircraft represented a different generation of Thunderbirds, different advancements in technology. Technology that in 1983 brought us the jet that revolutionized the fighter aircraft world and today remains a dominant force in the sky, the mighty F-16 Fighting Falcon. The Thunderbirds have flown the F-16 for more than 30 years now. Minus the red, white, and blue paint scheme, they are the same as the jets flying missions around the world today. It only makes sense that when people think of the Thunderbirds, they more than likely think of our F-16s, while those jets are our most visible assets and project the strength of our Air Force. It is our airmen that make it all possible. The Thunderbirds are comprised of more than 130 airmen. There are 12 officers, each known affectionately by their number, with one exception, number 1. Our commander, we call him Boss. He and Thunderbirds 2 through 8 are highly experienced fighter pilots. Thunderbirds 1 through 6 are our demonstration pilots. Thunderbird 7 oversees Thunderbird operations, and Thunderbird 8 acts as our advanced pilot and narrator during shows. Thunderbirds 9 through 12 are support officers who perform expert medical, administrative, maintenance, and public affairs functions. There are also more than 120 enlisted personnel representing nearly 30 career fields. Enlisted team members are selected from units across the Air Force. Each enlisted member plays a crucial role maintaining this well-oiled machine at home and on the road. Our time in this uniform is short, and each one of us is charged by making the most of it. by inspiring and encouraging others, by representing our amazing Air Force. So while the faces and jets have changed, the mission remains the same. This is your United States Air Force Air Demonstration Squadron. We are the Thunderbirds.
Grew up in El Paso, far west side of El Paso, on a little cotton farm out there. And I always knew I wanted, my mom was a nurse, and so it kind of helped me sort of steer me into the medical community. I initially did my first 2.5 years at New Mexico State University, which is just outside of El Paso in Las Cruces, New Mexico. But one of the things that made me swing back to Texas, particularly I went to Texas Tech to finish out my bachelor's, is there's only one medical school in New Mexico, and there's, at the time, I think there was 9 in Texas. So it's kind of a state residency is a big part of where you apply. So I thought, well, you know, I'm just going to swing back over and I'm going to apply to Texas Tech and see if they let me in. They did. Got in, got my bachelor's, got my master's at Texas Tech, and then got accepted to the medical school there in Lubbock. So I was actually in Lubbock for quite a while. I was, I was a professional student for a while. I always knew that I needed to do something, some kind of service for the country. I wouldn't say I'm, you know, one of the born on the 4th of July types who's, you know, born and bred to join the military, but definitely military service is prevalent in my family. A lot of members of my family. My dad was a nurse anesthetist in the Army in Vietnam, for example. And so I always knew that I needed to do something, some kind of service, right? And when I found out that being in, you know, most of the branches of the military, they have pretty good representation by physicians in their medical corps, I thought, well, you know, that's a great way to combine the two to serve. And I thought, well, I'll probably just go, I'll join, I'll serve a tour, and then I'll get out and go into private practice. You know, I had no intentions at the time, or no plans at least, of serving a career in the military, which is probably what's going to wind up happening here now, almost 11 years later. So that was my going in plan. And I'd gotten accepted to medical school, and I started shopping myself around. I had my acceptance letter, talking to the Army. I had an appointment with the Navy, and I hadn't quite made it to the Air Force yet. And I was talking to my mom, and you know, she was an Army wife, and she was like, hey, when are you interviewing with the Air Force? Oh, I haven't quite, you know, it's like, I haven't quite made it to that point yet. I'm still talking to the Army and the Navy. She said, yeah, just join the Air Force, right? I was like, Mom, you were an Army wife. I mean, you know, don't you have any kind of esprit de corps or anything like that? She's like, yeah, I was an Army wife. That's why I'm saying join the Air Force. So I was walking out of the Army recruiter's office, had a good meeting with them, and someone called just randomly out of the thin blue sky. Someone called my cell phone, which I didn't give that number out just willy-nilly, and it was the Air Force recruiter. I was like, hey, yeah, great. I was planning on meeting with you guys, but how on earth did you get my cell phone number? He's like, oh yeah, your mom called and gave it to us and said you were shopping yourself around. I was like, well, okay, that fits. And so interviewed with the Air Force and had a really great interview, and I liked what they offered, and so I joined. What was my path to the Thunderbirds? So I was in residency at the time, and my mentor, who was an attending physician, one of my trainer physicians, Colonel Lau, Hank Lau, his call sign's Candyman. He was himself a prior Thunderbird number 9, prior flight surgeon. And he's a really, really good friend of mine, great mentor. I thank God every day that I had him in that program with me. And he started telling me pretty soon after I got there and we got to know each other, he's like, hey, you need to throw your name in the hat for this. And you know, I've seen those emails before. It wasn't anything new, but my mentor is like, hey man, you need to throw your name in the hat for this. I think you'd be just the right man. They're looking for the job. And it's like, I don't know. I'm not the guy. I'm not who they're looking for. You know, I don't think so. And he just kind of kept on, you know, encouraging me, and thank God for good mentors, because, you know, if it weren't for him and his advice, I wouldn't have done it. I just would have let it pass by. But, you know, the email came out, and I was working on an inpatient shift, which is a really, really rough month. in residency, in the family medicine residency over at Travis Air Force Base, which is where I did my residency. So you're putting in like baseline 12, 14-hour days. That's just like normal. And then every 5th day, you're going to work like a 30-hour shift. So that was, and you only get 4 days off a month. So it was during that time that I had to put my application together, and the application's pretty involved, sort of by design. Like you have to get it done in that short amount of time, you have to show a certain amount of motivation. And that's kind of like part of the reason behind it. And then after that, if you're a finalist, they want you to come out to a show and then actually work the show for a day, or actually it's a week-long interview process. So that's a couple months later when they whittle everyone down to the finalists. So sure enough, a few months later, they're calling everybody out. It was at Niagara Falls was the show that I needed to go work at. So I had to fly from Sacramento, California to Niagara Falls. And I was, of course, back on one of these inpatient rotations, working these horrible shifts. And I had to somehow come up with time to go out there and interview. And there's no way I was going to make a week. Like, that just was not going to happen. So I managed to work like 12 days in a row to stack the days off that I only get 1 day off a week. So I stacked those together. I covered a bunch of other dudes' shifts. And then here again, I had a bunch of friends really, really come up for me and help me out. Like, some of them were working. One guy worked an overnight shift for me. Some guys were rounding on my patients. And so I managed to get 72 hours squished together by working all these days in a row and stacking my days off and getting my buddies to help me out. I got these 72 hours, and the Thunderbirds were willing to work with me, thank God. And they said, hey, come on out. We're going to do all your interviews in like one 24-hour period. It's going to be what's called the 12-man interview, where you sit on a table and the opposite end is all the officers, and they ping you with questions, all 12 of them. And then you interview with a 2-star general who's commander of the Air Warfare Center, and any other interviews that we have to do. We're just going to stack them all for you. Just come out and get them done all that one day.
So I am number 8, the advanced pilot and narrator. And what goes into that job? It's really kind of 2, and there's even a 3rd job in there that's not on the flight suit right there. But so I got 2 jobs. So first is the advanced pilot job. So what goes into that is I really kind of build the foundation for the team before they show up at air shows. So on a normal type of schedule, I will leave on a Wednesday, and I will travel with my crew chief who sits in the back seat. There's 2 flying crew chiefs in the Air Force that get to fly in the F-16s, and they're both my crew chiefs, which is pretty awesome. So we go out ahead of the team, usually a day ahead of the team. We hit the ground, and we, my crew chief becomes the maintenance subject matter expert for everything. So he goes and he grabs the maintenance projo for the show site, and they go out and they look at all of the maintenance stuff. So maintenance equipment, where the jets are parking, all the different logistics that go into moving the ground equipment and getting it into position and everything like that, and any obstacles that we're going to have to deal with. And then I sit down and I have a meeting with all of the with all the people that are working on the show, from the director down to the air traffic controller to public affairs, everything like that. So we sit there and we basically hash out everything, the whole list of things that we have to go over. That includes parking of the jets, how we're going to get our vehicles, where's our hotel at, how are we going to gain access from the hotel to the show site? Are there special gates that we have to use? Are there gate codes? Are there different routes? Is there a police escort? I got to coordinate with that. Public affairs, what kind of public relations events are we having? Are there any interviews that need to be done? What kind of plainside media do you need? There's air traffic control, and that's, hey, when the jets arrive the next day, here's what's going to happen. And so there's a whole coordination piece that goes there. So there's a lot of details. There's a lot of logistics that I go over, and I basically combine all that information into a little briefing that I send out to the team, and it just gives them a heads up. Hey, here's what you can expect. Here's all the new things that I found out. We have an itinerary that we follow, but those ops notes that I send out that my crew chief and I compile, we send that lets the team really know kind of what's going on. And that's really like the 90% of my job is getting all that stuff. And that's all done in the background, which is, it's pretty awesome for me because you really get to see the fruits of your labor at work. You get to, if you coordinate something and it works out for the team, there's nothing better than that. It's super rewarding for me to get that done. The second part, the narration. So I narrate the entire demonstration. So every time we go fly a demo, I'm on the mic narrating it. I would say it's not something that everybody wants to do is be on the microphone in front of sometimes hundreds of thousands of fans out there. But I get to run the narration, tell people where the planes are coming from. Sometimes I do a little ad lib in there. I get to, whenever we do dedications during the show, I get to give those dedications, which is very special. And then we also run the music. I have a DJ who sits next to me, and he is making sure that the music hits are on time. But then we also coordinate while sometimes mid demonstration, we'll switch things up if we need to, or we'll adjust timing because timing here is a little bit off, so we need to adjust it over here on this side. But we'll coordinate, right? We're right next to each other, and we're making sure all the music hits are perfect and the music sounds good, and that really kind of brings the whole demonstration together. Then behind me, we have like a whole team that's making sure the radios are working so we can talk to the pilots. I'm also on a headset there, backing up number 7 in case there's any sort of issues with his comm or anything like that. And then really the tertiary part of my job that's not on the flight suit is I get to do all of the media, hometown hero, celebrity flights. So when we give those flights to folks, I get to fly them. And that's probably one of the coolest things that I get to do because I get to show off our mission to all those folks. And I really get to give them an appreciation for what goes into not just being a fighter pilot or what it is to fly in a fighter jet, but also everything that happens beforehand. All the mission planning, all the training that they have to do with our aircrew flight equipment folks. They got to sit with our flight doc and make sure that they're healthy enough to fly. Then they get to meet all of our maintainers when they go out there and see the work that they do to put these jets up in the air day in, day out. And then we even put their name on the side of the jet before they go fly. So it's pretty awesome. I've really gotten to fly some special people. Really, our Hometown Hero program is incredible. There's some folks, just normal everyday American citizens who have been presented with extraordinary scenarios, and they just go well above and beyond what they're supposed to be capable of, and they make things happen from saving infants' lives to running into burning houses and pulling people out to stopping school shootings. It's just incredible that I've gotten to meet those people, fly them, and share their stories. Mm-hmm. And so that's really kind of the bulk of my job, aside from the daily, the interactions with the community engagement, interacting with the public. There's nothing better than that, talking to kids about your job and trying to inspire really the next generation.
So whenever we do one of the media flyers, so the first thing we do is we get their, have to go through their medical history. So I'm a physician, which means I'm allowed to see private information. HIPAA is the law that all healthcare providers abide by with regard to valuing somebody's like sensitive and private personal medical issues. So as a doctor, I'm one of the few people in the squadron who's allowed to see that kind of information. So I'm obviously the first point for that. So I go through their medical records just to make sure they're okay. Nothing that makes them unsafe. And you got to make sure that they're safe for everything, because for example, you wouldn't plan on ejecting out of a jet if you're just doing a media flyer, but it's possible. It's one of the things that could potentially happen. It never has, thank God, but you have to be ready for it. You have to make sure that this person has is going to be able to tolerate that and it won't kill them or something along those lines. So you have to review their medical history with that in mind. What's the worst that could happen? That's what you're asking yourself. Most people pass and they do fine. And then they come and we'll do most of them on the road, and we'll just pick an office, find an office somewhere, and we'll do some quick training. So there's 3 big things that I train to just to get them to tolerate the media profile flight that we do. So I'll train to the The first thing is motion sickness, because when you're in the back of the jet, spinning and looping all around, you know, it can be a pretty grim environment back there. You can get motion sick really, really easily. And so I give them a few tricks to try and help with it. You know, that may or may not work. In the end, if you're going to get sick, you're going to get sick. And that's just, you know, try and deal with it as best you can. So the next thing that we deal with is clearing your ears. So you probably felt it, you know, I don't know if you've ever scuba dove or snorkeled or anything like that. When you descend, certainly in an airliner, you feel it a little bit when you descend, your ears build up that pressure and you have to pop them. So in a fighter, you're going to descend a lot faster than in an airliner. So you have to be really, really well trained at clearing your ears. So I show them a couple of different methods of doing that. All right, what have we done to accommodate COVID? We've changed an awful lot. So first off, big picture, we've canceled the first half of our season. And a lot of shows we've canceled on our end, and a lot of shows on their end have canceled as well, just because getting, you know, 20, 30, 40,000 people together is just a recipe for spreading the coronavirus. So that's one of the first things that's happened. And that's nationwide. You know, every form of entertainment, just every gathering has been curtailed to try and halt the spread. Here on base, we've taken progressively more and more aggressive interventions. So now we're all wearing masks when we're in, you know, I'm in my office by myself, so I'm not wearing mine, but we're all wearing masks when we're out in public or you know, we're working near one another. There are only certain people that are allowed on base now, what we call mission essential. If you're not mission essential, then you're sent home and you're teleworking. We've had to restrict the access to a lot of civilians on base, a lot of retirees who are normally able to come on base. We have, we'll take care of them for like their prescriptions. An example, they can't come on base and get them filled anymore. We'll send them to an outside facility in the private sector. So a lot of our activity has been restricted the same as everybody else. You know, you leave your home to go to work, go to the grocery store, go get medical treatment, and go exercise. And that's really about it. That's the only reasons that you're able to leave your house. So we've curtailed a lot of our flying. We're only flying so many, you know, obviously our shows are canceled, but we're only flying so many practice runs now that we're not going to shows. Our maintainers, usually there's almost a 24-hour maintenance tempo going. You know, they work in several different shifts. We've stopped that, and our maintainers are only coming in for isolated shifts. We've split a bunch of our maintainers up into different teams. We're trying to sequester the different teams, come in and they do a given job, and they come in for a couple of days and then they leave. And then another team will come in and do the job for a couple of days and then they leave. They go back and forth. So we've split them up instead of just a big, you know, hey, everybody comes in all at once and does the work as a combined unit. Yeah, we've split it up into at least 3 different teams. So we've, and then anybody who has any kind of symptoms at all, they call me. I'm kind of the first point of contact. You know, if any, even just the sniffles, give me a call and I'll talk to you and we'll see if it's significant or not. If you meet any of the testing criteria for a SARS-2 infection. So then we'll pretty aggressively quarantine them out, get them tested if they meet the testing criteria, that kind of thing. So we've taken an awful lot of steps here on base to mitigate the spread of the infection.
How do you do a flyover? Really, kind of how do you put a flyover together? I'll say we've done some pretty big flyovers just in my time on the team. Last year we did the Super Bowl down in Atlanta. That was absolutely incredible the way we put that together. We did the Captain Marvel world premiere flyover over Hollywood Boulevard, which is first ever, never been done. That was amazing. That's another story that's incredible. We did flyover for the Daytona 500. We do that pretty much every year. So how do you put that? What goes into that? That's actually a really good question, because there's a lot that goes into it to get the timing down to where the national anthem singer is at the home of the Brave. You know, we try to fly over right at the B in Brave. So how do we do that? Well, it all starts from, we'll start at the target backwards. So the target being the B in Brave. We need timing from the national anthem singer. So typically every event that has a big flyover, will do a practice for the national anthem. So the singer or whoever is performing it will practice, and the production companies have a little timing sheet with the words of the national anthem in there so that they can keep track of the time. All this behind the scenes, maybe you know a little bit more about this than I do, but production companies, especially when they're working with big national networks like Fox, they have a to the second time log of everything that's going to happen, when they're going to go to commercial, when they're going to go to break, when someone's going to get introduced to say something. So they have a to the second of everything that's going to happen. So we use their timing, and we take that and we match it up with the national anthem, and then we start building our run-in or our flyover. So we typically will hold anywhere between 15 to 25 miles away, and our boss will set the timing up. He can set that up in the jet. He can go, okay, I want to be over this steer point at 1800. So you set that up in the jet, you set the steer point up where you want to fly over, you set the time that you want to be over the flyover, and then there's a little caret in the jet that pops up and it tells you what airspeed to fly so that you nail that timing. So Bossel, he's very good at that. He's very good at flying the airspeeds and making sure the formation is set together. Now, the other piece of that is what me and Seven do. So what Seven and I do is we are on the ground and we're in contact with the production company, making sure that they're hacking their watches at the right time and making sure the timing is good. Seven is usually monitoring the time over steer point. So he takes those times and he'll write them down and he'll track them. I usually have a headset on, and I'm actually in comms with Boss, and I'm passing all that information to him. But I'm also backing up number Seven. So he's looking at times. He's working with the production company. You know, he's got like 2 phones to his ears. So we're also coordinating with air traffic control, whether that be local agencies or even higher, like center controllers, to make sure that airspace is clear and there's no traffic and everything like that. So it's a big process. There's a lot of things going on, and that's not even all of it. There's a whole bunch more people. There's people that are filming. There's people that are making sure our radio communications are perfect. So we have radio communications folks that fine tune our audio equipment to make sure that when we want to communicate with the pilots, like there's no issues. So there's a lot of different moving pieces. Obviously, then there's all our maintainers who are working on the jets to make sure we have 6 airplanes available to actually do this flyover. But when it's game time and you know we pass TOTs, Boss is flying in to meet his initial time over steer point, and then if anything changes, I'll pass a new time to him, and he'll adjust his power and his airspeed so that he can nail that timing. There's a lot of wild cards in there still, even though we do all that stuff to try and perfect it. There's a lot of wild cards. If you know, people prior to the national anthem draw things out or end things, you know, cut things short. If the national anthem singer decides to do something different and again draws things out, you know, it could really make us look like we're super early or super late. Luckily, we haven't had really any of those issues. So a lot of moving pieces to make it work, but we nailed it. For the Daytona 500 this past year,
the 62nd Daytona 500 is underway.
You know, we get to park our jets at the Daytona International Airport, which is right next to the track. So it's pretty cool because as soon as we take off, all the fans and everybody can hear us and see us and everything like that. And that's, you know, everything that I described is exactly what we do. We went out to 15 to 20 miles. We passed times to Boss. And this one was actually, this one was a little bit different because President Trump was there, right? So it actually made the airspace easier for us because the president travels with a temporary flight restriction, or TFR.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
That was a whole nother logistical thing that we had to work out. So obviously we had to work with Secret Service because Air Force One was essentially parked, you know, a few hundred feet away from our jet. And we needed people out by our aircraft, you know, working on jets and things like that to launch aircraft. So we had to to get some approval from some pretty high levels of White House and Secret Service to get people out there working and just making sure that all that stuff was good to go, because it is the President of the United States, right? Mm-hmm. So there was a whole different plan. So I had to work with, White House, Secret Service, airspace people, ground people, air traffic control people, everybody in their whole operation of getting the president to the Daytona 500 and that safely, get him on into the stadium and then get him out of there and getting him home, right? So they have a whole team, and their objective is keeping the president safe and making sure everything is safe there. And our objective was just to fly over and get everything done. So, it's sometimes it's tough to work that out, but we worked with some really, really great people at the White House and Secret Service that were able to facilitate all that stuff for us. We even got to meet the president at the end of it all, which was pretty cool that they were able to hook that up.
Air Force One. Air Mobility Command supports 2 no-fail missions, vital to U.S. national security. The number 1 mission is the nuclear mission. The number 2 mission is presidential airlift. These 2 missions are Mobility Airmen's highest priority. Air Force One and its subtle yet distinguished paint scheme, one-of-a-kind call sign, and ability to enable national interest through global transportation is operated and maintained by the Presidential Airlift Group, assigned to Air Mobility Command's 89th Airlift Wing, located at Joint Base Andrews, Maryland. The first flight of Air Force One was on January 11, 1943, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt flew to Morocco on a Boeing 314 Clipper. Roosevelt became the first president to travel abroad on an airplane as he flew to the Casablanca Conference. This record-setting journey paved the runway to a new age of presidential travel and the idea that a single military aircraft should be dedicated and reserved for this special air mission. In 1953, mid-air confusion over similar call signs between Eastern Airlines Flight 8610 and Air Force Flight 8610, which was carrying President Dwight D. Eisenhower, would change this special air mission forever. As a result, the call sign Air Force One was created and utilized anytime the President of the United States boarded an Air Force aircraft. In 1962, the first aircraft designed specifically for presidential travel entered into service. Special Air Mission, or SAM 26000, premiered the now famous Air Force One paint scheme and was the most technologically advanced aircraft used for presidential travel. SAM 26000 was just 1 year old when it carried President Kennedy home from Dallas, Texas, after his assassination. SAM 2 8000 and SAM 2 9000 have been in service since 1990 and have transported 5 active presidents across the globe. This aircraft and the airmen aboard were pushed to their limits on September 11, 2001.
There's numerous emergency action plans to take care of the president, so we had to go ahead and start putting those plans into effect to make sure that everybody was ready to accept the president and get him where he needed to go. So at that point, we started heading out into the Gulf of Mexico to make sure we could keep him safe and get him away from the airliner traffic. Shortly after, the president made the decision he wanted to get on the ground so he could talk to the American people. My thought process throughout the whole thing was to get him to an Air Force base with high security. We could land and I could have all the capabilities I ever needed. You know, there were 300 folks that worked Air Force One, but more important, there were thousands of military that supported us day in, day out, that kept the president safe, that, you know, they're the ones that should be getting the big pat on the back and the big hug, because they did everything perfect to make it look seamless for all of us.
Mobility Airmen are committed to providing safe and reliable travel, logistics, aerial port services, security, and global air-to-ground communications for the President, senior U.S. leaders, and senior military leaders. This capability provides the opportunity for leaders to communicate and build partnerships. The level of professionalism and expertise found in the men and women of the 89th Airlift Wing represent the very best of the excellence found throughout the United States Air Force. The men and women of the 89th Airlift Wing continue their no-fail mission. There are hundreds of maintainers, aerial porters, security forces, and communication professionals ensuring the perfect execution of the Sam Fox mission. History is made with every Air Force One takeoff and landing. And this is possible because of the dedication of the men and women serving Air Mobility Command and the United States Air Force.
All those flying movies, are they realistic, and what do we do to consult on that? Well, I'll start with Captain Marvel. We actually had Brie Larson actually came down to Nellis Air Force Base and spent a good amount of time with us, kind of learning what it was like to be a fighter pilot. She got a back seat ride and everything. This was a few years ago, so I wasn't on the team when it happened. But she spent a lot of time with the Thunderbirds, kind of learning everything about how it worked. So as far as consulting, that's what we did at Nellis Air Force Base. It wasn't just the Thunderbirds, but kind of all the different agencies at Nellis that helped support that. So she got a lot of her character research done there. Also, producers, directors were there as well, kind of learning about the process and everything, so they could tell, a somewhat accurate story. Marvel superheroes, it's not very realistic, so it's tough to work in the realism there. We had some guys on the team that helped her out personally, and they were actually in the movie, in some of the extra shots. Mm-hmm. And there was a dedication to Cajun, who was in the incident a few years ago in the movie, which was pretty special for us, especially when we went to the premiere and we were able to actually see that.
Last week, Thunderbirds pilot Major Stephen D.W was killed when his F-16 crashed during a routine aerial demonstration training flight over the Nevada Test and Training Range. 57th Fighter Wing Commander Brigadier General Janee Levitt said, "We are mourning the loss of Major D.W. He was an integral part of our team, and our hearts are heavy with his loss. An investigation is being conducted to determine the cause of the mishap, and it is unknown how the accident will impact the remainder of the 2018 season."
I'll tell you, there's a lot of Hollywood and movie tricks that they do for those movies to make them look cool. It's not all super realistic. There's certain parts that are correct, but I don't really know any fighter pilots that fly with their visors up and masks down, that talk a whole lot when they're in the cockpit and everything like that. So there's a few movie magic things that happen to make it entertaining and exciting, but it's fun and it gets people motivated, and whether it's a second or third order effect of that is it helps recruitment. Really, it really does help to recruit kids to be fighter pilots, and we need fighter pilots right now. It sure does help us, and we can talk to it a little bit. And if you're a fighter pilot and you say you haven't thought about the Top Gun music while you're taking off or somewhere in the airspace, you're probably lying to yourself. This all ties into sort of the theme of my Air Force career, is like, you're going to hit a lot of bumps in the road. There's going to be a lot of roadblocks, but you have to keep persevering if you're passionate about your pursuits. I kind of stole that from my buddy Cajun.
So I was born in Dallas, Texas. My parents split when I was a really young age. I moved when I was 3 years old to Wichita Falls, Texas with my dad. At the time, my mom just wasn't quite ready to support a family with some things she had going on. And so I grew up with it was my dad and my sister. My sister's she's 18 months younger than me, special needs. And we grew up in Wichita Falls. We grew up kind of on the other side of the train tracks. So we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't, and when I say not a lot of money, that's a little bit of an understatement. We were straight up poor. Wichita Falls is home of Sheppard Air Force Base, which has one of the world's best pilot training bases in it. And underneath my house, for one of the final turns, was where the T-38s would fly. And so growing up, I would see these airplanes flying overhead, and I've always loved machines. I've always loved understanding how things work, and seeing these aircraft flying overhead was something that seemed to me that would be amazing to do. I had no idea how to do it. I had nobody in my family who had ever gone to college. Nobody had ever, my dad had flown a little bit earlier in life in small little civilian airplanes, but I didn't really have anybody to kind of help me, direct me on how to do that or how to accomplish that. That's one of the things I'm really excited about being on this team, is having the opportunity to reach out to people and tell them how you do this, and exactly kind of what this show is talking about, is how to achieve those dreams or objectives, if that's what you want to do. So I grew up in Wichita Falls. My freshman year of high school, I actually moved down to the Dallas area to Flower Mound High School to live with my mom. Her life had changed a little bit, and so my sister and I moved to Flower Mound, which is a little bit of a culture shock, socioeconomic, from what I was used to. But went through Flower Mound High School. Actually met my wife there. We started dating my junior year of high school. From there, in high school, kind of towards my senior year, I applied to both academies, both the Naval Academy and the Air Force Academy, knowing that I wanted to fly airplanes. And I was told by the Naval Academy, I had my congressional nomination to the Naval Academy. The Naval Academy actually didn't accept me. And I didn't have my congressional nomination to the Air Force Academy, but they said, here's a scholarship. You can go to school if you want to. And so being kind of a first generation person to go to college, it was an opportunity for me that I didn't want to pass up. They were going to pay for my school. And I don't think that I would have made it otherwise. So the Air Force paid for me to go to school. While at Texas A&M, I studied civil engineering, and I was in the Corps of Cadets. So that was, I did 4 years in the Corps. I did a 5th year, as I call it, a victory lap, to get through and graduate in 2009 from Texas A&M. From there, I stayed in Texas, so I went back to Wichita Falls and actually learned how to fly airplanes in Wichita Falls at Sheppard Air Force Base, which is home of ENNJPT, Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training. It's actually a NATO pilot training base. And so that's where I learned to fly airplanes. I flew T-6s, T-38s, and then from there, I was selected to go fly the F-15, which was my #1 choice. I love Texas with every fiber I am, but I joined the Air Force because I wanted to see the world. And the F-15 is actually, at the time, was only stationed in either Japan or England. So I knew I had the opportunity to kind of go travel and learned how to go fly the F-15. I spent 3 years in Japan, flying F-15s out of Japan. That's where we were based out of. I actually flew kind of all over the world, all over the Pacific, America, Middle East. And so I had the opportunity to really travel quite a bit there. From there, I actually went back to Texas, back to Wichita Falls, to go teach what's called Introduction to Fighter Fundamentals. So I would take students who had just graduated from pilot training, and I would teach them how to basic fighter fundamentals in the T-38. So I teach them how to dogfight. I teach them how to drop bombs in the T-38, and I did that for a few years. From there, I went to England to go fly F-15s again for a little bit of time before getting selected to come join the Thunderbirds and be the #2 pilot and fly the F-16. So as the #2 pilot for the Thunderbirds, I am the secretary. So what that means is that when boss is giving the calls of, hey, here's going to be the next maneuver, here's going to be the next thing we do, it's my job to back him up to make sure that it is the maneuver we're expecting, that we are in the correct formation, and kind of that challenge and response with boss to make sure that the whole team is working together. And so for some check-ins, if everybody else needs to respond, it's a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? We'll go down the line. For other responses, if he says something, I just respond with a got it, boss, because just letting him know that I've acknowledged that. Whenever he's calling up for the next maneuver, the tradition within the Thunderbirds is that the #2 pilot gets to choose how he responds with whatever acknowledgement he wants. So the previous #2, Captain Grave or Major Grave, he responded with legendary. So anytime the boss would be, hey, we're going to be back for a clover loop opener, he'd say legendary, and that was kind of the response. And when we were going through training season, I kept trying out a lot of different words. And we actually had a whiteboard where I'd write stuff down, and other people were like, that didn't work out. That one wasn't very good. Well, we were getting closer and closer to when we were going to start doing shows, and we were approaching the Daytona 500, which is traditionally our first show of the year. And boss gave me an ultimatum. He's like, you need to have this by Daytona. Whatever it is, that's going to be it. And it was the day before the Daytona flyover. I was like, you know what? I just need to go with something that feels right. And so I tried responding with yeehaw and throwing out a big old yeehaw. And it just felt right. And everyone in the room said, this is it. Like, it was one of those things that once it clicked, like that was it. So from now on, for the next couple of years, anytime boss says, hey, we're going to be doing this maneuver, I get to throw out a big old yeehaw and have some fun with it. It's kind of tough to say where American Strong started because at the local level here in the squadron, we had our own desires and intentions to do these flyovers and say thank you to the frontline workers. But at the same time, senior leaders had the same idea that occurred at about the same time. And what wound up happening is that both of our visions kind of met in the middle to allow us to be able to execute these missions. So the genesis of it was that when COVID, we were packed up, ready to go for our very first air show. We're actually going to be going to Del Rio, Texas for our very first air show. Bags were packed on the C-17. We were about to step in this room to start our brief to go that way. About 20 minutes before we had our brief, we got the call that they had canceled the show. And we knew that the next weekend was probably going to be canceled as well. And so things started unraveling pretty quick. Initially, what we did is we took about 2 weeks, just kind of self-quarantine, not flying, mission essential only flying, to take a step back and kind of see how this virus is going to progress and what the impacts of it were going to be. And while we had that time alone, we started brainstorming. And, we were seeing via social media and friends what the frontline workers were going through. We saw that they were working incredible hours. We saw that they were working sometimes without the protective gear that they needed, really risking their lives to help try and save other people's lives. And it was at that moment that we decided that we wanted to try and do something for them. So what we decided to do is we're here in Las Vegas, like I mentioned earlier, we're in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we came up with the idea of, why don't we just fly over the hospitals here in Las Vegas? This was a few weeks into it, and people were still a little scared. There's a lot of isolation going on, and these healthcare workers were working extremely hard. Fortunately, our leadership supported our vision and allowed us to fly over. When we did that flyover, we really didn't know what the response was going to be. We didn't know if it was going to be a positive response. We didn't know if it was going to be a negative response. People upset we're making noise, thinking we're wasting money, not really understanding how military budgets work. But the response was overwhelming. So a couple weeks later, we went to go fly over the academy for their graduation. 2020! And we had the idea, well, since we're already there, why don't we just get a little bit more gas from our tanker and do a flyover of Colorado, Denver, from Denver all the way down to Pueblo, Colorado. And we flew over, and once again, the response was absolutely incredible. So I think with those two data points, we knew that we were onto something positive that we could be used in a way that was more efficient and better than just flying over nobody in the deserts of Nevada. And we could use our resources and the budget that had already been allocated to help say thank you to the frontline workers, to help spread a message to the American people, to say that, even though we're distant, even though we're social distancing in this moment, we are still in this together. And we could do it in a way that was social distance, where we could take off from our home base, hit a tanker on the way out to where we were going, fly over these cities, and then come back to our home base without the potential spread of the virus at all. So that's when we got the idea and really needed the senior leadership to really jump in on this and approve. We flew to Pensacola, and we based out of Pensacola for a few weeks. There we learned to train with the Blue Angels, something that had never been done before, where we had flown together in those two formations as close as we were. And so we went over the Gulf of Mexico and trained together for a little bit. And as soon as we put feet on the ground, our two squadrons became one squadron. From mission planning to flight execution to whatever it was, our two squadrons immediately became one. And so it was a really cool opportunity. They were incredible hosts and incredibly supportive, right? There are little different nuances in the cultures between the two, but we merged pretty seamlessly. Once we figured out how to fly with each other, then we took the road up to New York and Philadelphia. So we took off out of Pensacola, we flew up to New York, Trenton, Philadelphia, and flew back and landed in Pensacola that same day. And New York was a special one. At the time, I was looking up CDC stats, and at the time there was already 15,000 deaths, which is terrible. So the reception that we got was pretty profound from the frontline workers who had been working through the struggle it meant a lot to be able to do that. A couple days later, we planned the mission. We flew over Baltimore. We flew over Washington, D.C., over the mall, and got to do the same mission there. We flew over Atlanta. And then from there, we kind of split and decided to go take different paths. So from there, the Blues kind of started working on the East Coast. We went back home to Las Vegas, and we flew over San Antonio and Austin, which was great to get to bring that back to my home state and show some love to the state of Texas. And then just recently we flew over San Diego and Los Angeles. Are we using our resources correctly by doing these Operation America Strong? I think that's a completely valid question. And honestly, it's a testament to America and the United States that people are able to ask those questions and are and able to hold the military accountable for the money they're spending and those kinds of things. So I welcome the questions. But I think it's important for people to understand what the situation is and what's going on. So the fact is that this budget, just the way that government budgets work, was established at the beginning of the year. And that money has already been spent. It's essentially sunk cost. So we have the option of either flying over the Nevada desert, continuing to practice in front of nobody, but being ready for when the airship season starts, or allocating that budget that's already been spent to flying over cities and saying thank you to frontline workers and telling people that we're in this together. I think another important thing for people to understand is that with this PPE gear and stuff like that, it's not really a budget issue. It's more of a production issue, right? We haven't been able to produce these things enough. So even if you had more money to throw at it, you want to be able to produce the equipment. So the money had already been spent. It was already sunk cost, and it's more of a production issue with PPE gear anyway. So what we were really doing is just trying to find a way to appropriately use the money that was being spent so that it wasn't wasted.
Howdy, I'm Major Frank Zaskaville, call sign Chomps. I'm number 3, the left wingman, F-18 demonstration pilot for the United States Navy Blue Angels.
So a little about me and my background. Before the Blue Angels, I grew up in Kingwood, Texas, and went to Kingwood High School. It's a suburb just on the northeast side of Houston, there in Texas. I played sports. I did football and swimming and lacrosse. I also was in the band. I did some military marching things. I tried to be as well-rounded as I possibly could, including earning my Eagle Scout when I was 18 years old. From there, I went to Texas A&M University, where I majored in psychology, got a Bachelor of Science in Psychology of all degrees, and then used that to ultimately join the Marine Corps. So I went out, looked at a bunch of different services, different branches of the military, and both of my cousins were current active duty Cobra pilots for the Marine Corps. And in very polite words, they said, if you join any other branch besides the Marine Corps, we're going to disown you from the family. So it made my decision quite easy. And next thing you know, I signed a air contract for the Marine Corps and went off to the basic school up in Quantico, Virginia. Texas really helped shape me and mold me into to have the motivation to join the military. Coming from a family who's all Texans, 100% Texans, military background was very important to us. And at least one member from each family has kind of represented their side in the military for the past, 50 years or so from our side. After the basic school in the Marine Corps, I then started flying the AV-8B Harrier down in Cherry Point, North Carolina. I then picked up a conversion package to go fly the F-35B Stoughville variant of the F-35 Lightning II. And then from there, I got selected to then fly the F-18 Hornet for the Blue Angels this past year. I didn't meet Trevor I actually didn't even know Trevor until we both joined the teams. He was a year ahead of me at A&M. He did a 5-year, I did a 4-year, so we basically graduated at the same time. When both of us got selected, I just reached out to him. I found him on Facebook. I found him and I was like, hey, let's go through this together. Let's find out what's different. Let's find out what's so similar between the two teams. We're in a unique, a very, very unique experience here to have two of us doing the exact same position on two different teams at the same time. So we kind of just linked up that way. So I spent some time in Corpus Christi and Kingsville, Texas, down in the south towards the border on the Rio Grande for our primary flight training. After we get out of the basic school as Marines and then ultimately beginning naval aviation part of our career, all Navy and Marine Corps pilots will train together. We start in Pensacola, Florida at a place called Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination, API is what we refer to it as, where we learn the basics of weather and aerodynamics and how aircraft interact with each other in the sky with air traffic control and instrument flight procedures. From that school, we then kind of sparse out to around the country, and I chose to go down to Corpus Christi, Texas, where I learned to fly the T-34 Turbo Mentor. That plane is no longer there. We actually upgraded to the T-6 Texan, but I loved my time in the T-34 in Corpus. After primary flight training in Corpus, I jumped right across the little bay there to Kingsville, Texas, where I flew the T-45 Charlie. It's called the Goshawk. It's a single jet trainer that is going to help prepare you to fly jet engine aircraft in your fleet aircraft. After Kingsville is when we ultimately get selected for our fleet platform. That is where I picked up the Harrier, which is also a V-STOL capable aircraft, and proceeded from there onto my fleet career. For the American Strong Flyovers, Thunderbirds and Blue Angels, out of Pensacola, Florida, we would wake up in the morning very, very early. We'd start our briefs about 5:15 a.m. We'd then walk to our aircraft. The Air Force calls it stepping, because again, they like to use different terms than we do, but we'd walk to our aircraft. We'd take off sometime between 7 and 8 a.m. And then we'd fly. We'd meet a tanker about 45 minutes after taking off. Usually about South Carolina area is where we would meet up with the first tankers. And these tankers are out of McGuire, so up by New Jersey. We would then get gas, or tank is what we call it, 2 to 3 times on the way up to the location that we were going to fly over. We then drop down out of 24,000 feet, fly over the cities for about 30 minutes. We'd climb back up, get to the tankers. We would then get another 2 to 3 hits of gas. We then fly over to the next city, drop down out of 24,000 feet, fly over that city, pop back up, and then get gas on the way home. So all in all, we would get gas about 5 to 6 times every sortie, airborne. And then we would fly over each city for about 20 to 30 minutes. What did that allow us to do? It allowed the 2 teams to reduce the risk of COVID exposure and COVID expansion, to be honest with you, by having to land in different areas across the nation. What did we miss out on? We missed out on being able to talk to people on the ground. But in a quarantine environment, we felt that was the safest way to do it. And in a quarantine environment, we were still able to get out there and at least show some sort of respect to everybody out there on the ground who's fighting this challenging time. Yeah, so what do these flyovers look like in the air? I'll tell you what it looked like to me. It looked like I could see a blue jet, and that's all I could see, because that's what I'm staring at the entire time. Boss is able to look around a little bit more. I kind of joke a little bit, but you do look around a little bit as you're flying. Mostly the wingmen are all staring at some part on Boss's jet or the jet in front of them to be able to maintain the formation and the flight safety aspect. But occasionally, especially over Dallas, Houston, New York, Philly, Atlanta, those cities, Jacksonville, Miami, I was definitely taking peeks out the cockpit. You can't hear anything. One, because you have extremely loud jet engines around you inside of a closed pressurized canopy, wearing a helmet, so you're not going to be able to hear anything. You can see people, groups of people. You can see signs when you're down low. Sometimes you can't read the signs because you're going by. We typically stayed at about 350 knots, which is about 400-ish miles an hour, give or take, across these cities. So it was very quick peeks out, trying to see, but individuals, I couldn't make out individuals. If it was large groups of people, oh man, you bet. Sitting on, practicing social distancing, of course. We could definitely see those.
L. Golfine now relinquishes responsibility to General Charles Q. Brown Jr., who accepts the responsibility as the 22nd Chief of Staff.
I'm extremely honored, blessed, and proud of this tremendous privilege to serve as the 22nd Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force.
I don't know how official this is, but this is purely my understanding of it from an officer in the Air Force as to how it's working, is that it's going to be a subsidiary to the Air Force. So much like the Marine Corps is for the Navy, it is its own separate branch, but it still falls under the Department of the Navy. So the Space Force will still fall under the Department of the Air Force, but it will be its own branch of service. So think about it as kind of similar in design structure to the way the Marines are with the Navy. So will fighter pilots be going to the Space Force? Honestly, I don't know. I've always been obsessed with space personally, and I know talking to Flack, he's the same way, right? He put in his application for the astronaut recently, and I've always been obsessed with space. So when that happened, it was pretty alluring to consider, all right, are we going to be putting people in space? And if so, sign me up. I don't know where it's going. I don't know who it's going to recruit. But I do know that if they decide to put people in space for Space Force, I'll be the first one to sign up. I think that primarily what they're doing, it's primarily space defense. So it is more satellites, more controlling space missiles, space, whatever it is. I honestly, I'm not that privy to what the Defense Department is doing in space. But the moment they start putting people up there, I'll be signing up.